Hello, U.S. history students, and welcome to the first of 3 lessons this week dealing with the Civil Rights Movement. Now, this is the last new material that we will be covering this week. As you listen to these lessons, please be sure you are taking down your own notes, okay? Or you can use the worksheets that I've uploaded on Canvas. There will be little quizzes that accompany these lessons, but not a big assessment at the end, okay? Now, we're going to start here with the Civil Rights Movement Day 1. And what I want to do first is review what we've talked about concerning civil rights. This has been an issue since after the Civil War, okay, even all the way back to Reconstruction. And the first thing I want to be sure that we understand is the term segregation. Segregation means separation of the races. And like I said, that began after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, after Reconstruction. We will often use the term segregation and discrimination interchangeably. Segregation is a form of discrimination, but segregation refers to separation. So when we're talking about separation of the races, we're talking about segregation. How do we get segregation? Well, in the South, there were the Jim Crow laws, okay? The Jim Crow laws legalized segregation in places like schools, waiting rooms, elevators, restrooms, rail cars, streetcars, buses, drinking fountains that you can see there. And we talked about this. In fact, we used this photo of these water fountains here, okay? Well, hold on. Let me go to the next thing, okay? So the Jim Crow laws legalized segregation. The Jim Crow laws are upheld by the court case of Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson said separate but equal is okay. So going back to that picture of the two water fountains, okay, looking at that picture, you can clearly say, and I'll go back here real quick, you can clearly see that this one, the white only water fountain, looks better than this one, the colored water fountain. But according to Plessy versus Ferguson, as long as everybody has access to the water, that is perfectly okay. All right. It doesn't matter that one looks better than the other. Now, if people didn't have access to water, African Americans didn't have access to water, that would be one thing. But Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal, is okay. Now, it doesn't take people long to begin to challenge this idea in the courts. And those challenges were going to be led by a group called the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. We have talked about the NAACP in class. We talked about the fact that it was founded by W.B. Du Bois. All right. Now, the NAACP has some very skillful lawyers working for them. The first is Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall is kind of the national lawyer for the NAACP. He starts his career as a lawyer. He will go on to become a judge. In fact, he will go on to become a judge in the Supreme Court. And Thurgood Marshall used to tell a story that when he was little, he would get in trouble at school and he would be sent and have to copy parts of the Constitution over as a punishment. And by copying the Constitution, he began to appreciate the laws of the country, and he grew up wanting to be a lawyer. In Virginia, especially in Richmond, Virginia, the key NAACP lawyer is Oliver Hill. Okay, Oliver Hill is the lawyer for the NAACP in Virginia. He's from the Richmond area. And what the NAACP is going to do is they're going to begin to challenge separate but equal in terms of schooling. And that's going to lead to a very, very important case, Brown versus the Board of Education. Brown versus the Board of Education is essentially going to overturn Plessy versus Ferguson, because Brown versus the Board of Education says segregated schools are inherently unequal and that schools must desegregate. All right. They looked and they said all black schools do have certain disadvantages to all white schools. They are unequal and they must desegregate. Now, where this is going to lead us, okay, is if we can use that to desegregate schools, then we can use that ruling to desegregate other places as well. Okay, so while the case is specifically dealing with schools, The ruling can be applied later on to other locations. Now, so Brown versus the Board of Education says schools must desegregate. Now we've got to put that into practice. And it is not going to be easy. Okay, there's going to be big resistance to education. In some states, they are quick to integrate. Okay, in fact, the integration process has already begun. In other states, they refuse to integrate. All right, and they come up with some interesting ways to do that. Now, by the way, okay, some African Americans are not excited about desegregating the schools either because they see the African American schools as a community, okay? And they're worried about breaking up that community. If you've ever seen the Carver documentary, you get that feeling from the participants in the Carver documentary about G.W. Carver here in Salem, which was the African American school. They were seen as a family. And when it came time to desegregate, some people were worried about breaking up the family. Okay. So when we talk about this resistance to integration, it's not just white people. African Americans are going to have some difficulty with it as well. Now in Virginia, in some areas in Virginia, there was massive resistance. Okay. In some cases, the schools just closed. That's what you see here in the picture there from Prince Edward County. Okay, school property, no trespassing under penalty of law. They just closed the school. In some cases, what they would do is they would desegregate the public school, but then all the white students would end up going to a private academy. Okay, private academies would be created to avoid going to integrated schools. In some cases, the public school became a private school, and then they could decide who they wanted to and who they wanted to admit or not. And once again, not only is it going to be African Americans, but some of your poor white folk are going to be in this group as well. Okay, we're not going to let you come in either. All right, so that when people say, hey, aren't you kind of skirting around the law here? We must desegregate. The schools can say, nope, we're rejecting all kinds of people here. Okay, so there's massive resistance. Some schools close, period. Some schools become private academies. Some private academies are founded. That way, whoever's in charge can decide who comes and who doesn't. In terms of national exposure, there was a high school in Little Rock, Arkansas. Okay, and we get the Little Rock Nine. Eisenhower actually sends in the National Guard to escort 9 African American students to integrate Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. Okay, they had enrolled, they tried to show up, they were not allowed in the building. This went on for a couple of days, and Eisenhower said, nope, we are integrating, and if it takes the National Guard, I'm going to send in the National Guard, and that's what he did. Now, Central High School is still active today. It is still a high school today. It is also a National Historic Site. I think in the bottom of the building, in the basement of the building, there's a little museum that you can learn more about this. And it is, like I said, it is still an active high school. And this picture right here, years afterwards, this young lady right here, they did an interview with her, and she was talking about how ashamed she was and how her opinions had changed over time. And she said, I'm not making excuses, but this is the way we were raised, okay? But she does feel remorse about her role in the opposition to this young lady enrolling in the high school. And she said, I've changed, I've grown, my opinions have definitely changed, and I do feel ashamed of being a part of that and kind of having her image captured for all time in this state. Okay. Now, like I said, we can use the ruling in Brown versus Board of Education to challenge segregation in other areas. And one of the first areas we're going to see segregation challenged in is on buses. Okay, there's some more pictures there. The Little Rock Nine heading into class. Okay, now back to challenging segregation. We're going to challenge segregation on bus lines. That's going to lead to the Montgomery bus boycott. Okay, December 1955. It starts with this young woman right here. This is Rosa Parks. Okay, and you know the story. Hopefully, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger. Now, here's how it went. There was a line in the buses that separated the African American section from the white section. That line could be moved as more and more people got on the bus. So when Rosa Parks got on the bus, there wasn't anybody on there. And when she sat down, she sat in the African American section. But as she kept journeying, okay, she kept on her ride, more and more white people got on and they moved the line, okay, so that she was in the white section now. And that's when she says, "Nope, I'm tired. I'm not going to stand up. I'm not giving up my seat." Of course, she gets arrested, okay, and my understanding from a documentary I saw about this, the bus driver kind of said, "Hey, come on, can you just get up and move your seat? I'm gonna have to call the police. I don't want to have to do that." And she said, "No, I'm not moving." The police are called, and she gets arrested. She's gonna gain support from a young minister by the name of Martin Luther King Jr. And Martin Luther King Jr. and other African American leaders call for a bus boycott over the next year. And for a whole year, okay, no African Americans rode any buses in Montgomery, Alabama. They walked, okay, they carpooled if they could. Some cases, their employers actually came and picked them up and brought them to work, okay. But the majority of the business on the bus line was from African American passengers. And after a year of little to no business, the bus lines are like, look, we got to do something if we want to stay in business. Okay. So they become more open to maybe ending segregation on the bus lines. Now, like I said, Rosa Parks is going to gain support by a young minister by the name of Martin Luther King Jr. Okay. Martin Luther King Jr. was a pastor. He's very, very eloquent. He's a motivational speaker. Okay. He is very much interested in nonviolent resistance, okay, passive resistance. All right. Um, he picked this up from Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, he was a big fan of Gandhi and Gandhi's use of passive resistance, which is no matter how bad somebody treats you, you always react in a calm, peaceful manner. And to be honest with you, this is a very, very smart way to gain support for your cause. And you can see it. Not only was the bus boycott very peaceful, okay, we're just not going to ride the buses, but he also got people to participate in sit ins to protest segregation in places like lunch counters. Okay, one of the first ones, and this is the image right here, one of the first ones was in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is about 2 hours away. And there's a National Civil Rights Museum in Greensboro, North Carolina. And this lunch counter is preserved. You can go and visit this site, and it looks exactly like it does on this day when this sit-in began. But you can see, okay, all these guys are doing sitting down, okay, they just want something to eat. Same thing here. They're just sitting down, they want something to eat. But notice the reaction, okay? It's these people that are acting crazy. All right, they're pouring stuff on them. Okay, there's even a white supporter here, and he's gotten stuff dumped on him and things like that. And I think this is a white girl right there. People would take cigarettes and try to burn the protesters. But like I said, this is very, very powerful because when you see images like this, okay, people are going to be sympathetic and people are going to support the ones that are acting calm. They're going to think the ones that are acting a fool are ridiculous. Okay, so passive resistance, nonviolent resistance, is a very, very powerful tool in terms of gaining support. Now, Dr. King is going to go on to found in 1957 the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. And their goal is going to be to lead nonviolent crusades against the evils of segregation in all places around the country. And Dr. King is going to be joined by his wife, Coretta Scott King. And together, they and others, again, like I said, they're going to lead nonviolent crusades against segregation around the country. Sorry about that. I forgot I had my microphone on. Sorry. Or my walkie-talkie on. Sorry about that. So, Dr. King, his wife Coretta, and other supporters, their goal is to lead nonviolent crusades against the evils of segregation around the country. We have not heard the last from him. Okay, we're going to hear some more about him, more from him as we go through the next two lessons. All right, that's it for lesson one. If you need to, go back through, be sure you get your notes down, be sure maybe you filled in that worksheet that I've given you. There's a little quiz that's going to accompany this, and then be sure you head to lesson two and lesson three, and we're going to wrap up the civil rights movement this week.